Welcome to Book Nibbles. Big ideas, small bites. Gabriel García Márquez's 100 Years of Solitude unfolds like a dream stretched across a century, where the real and the magical weave together until they are indistinguishable, and where an entire family, the Buendias, becomes both the creators and the victims of their own destiny. It is the story of Macondo, a town born out of solitude in the Colombian jungle, and of a lineage haunted by repetition, passion, and the inability to escape cycles that seem written before they are lived. To read it is to step into a world where ice can be a miracle, where insomnia can erase memory, where ghosts linger in everyday rooms, and where wars drag on so long that their beginnings are forgotten. The tale begins with Jose Arcadio Buendia and Ursula Iguaran, cousins who marry despite the ominous fear that their union might produce children with a pig's tail, a warning whispered by family elders and remembered as both prophecy and curse. Jose Arcadio is a man possessed by ideas, restless and visionary, while Ursula is practical, enduring, and the spine of the family. Together they leave their home after Jose Arcadio kills Prudencio Aguilar in a duel, an act that fills him with guilt and that haunts him in the form of Prudencio's ghost. They wander through the wilderness with a group of settlers until Jose Arcadio dreams of a city by a river of clear water flowing over stones that look like polished eggs. He founds Macondo there, believing it to be a place free from the corruption of the world, a city of pure beginnings, isolated and untouched. Life in Macondo begins almost Eden-like, where children play freely and the boundaries between wonder and reality are porous. Gypsies led by the flamboyant Melquiades arrive each year to bring strange inventions: magnets, telescopes, alchemy, flying carpets, and, most memorably, ice. For Jose Arcadio Buendia, these novelties are not curiosities, but doorways into grand obsessions. He dreams of discovering universal truths, of decoding the mysteries of the world, and of dragging Macondo out of isolation into modernity. His relentless pursuit of knowledge eventually tips into madness, as he neglects his family and responsibilities, becoming lost in experiments that never quite deliver answers. Yet he is also the embodiment of a spirit that cannot rest, a visionary trapped in the confines of his own solitude. Ursula, by contrast, grounds a family. While her husband chases illusions, she builds a home, raises children, manages finances, and keeps the Buendia household functioning across decades of turmoil. She is not only the matriarch, but the anchor, and her longevity allows her to witness generations rise and fall, repeating names and mistakes until time feels circular rather than linear. The Buendia children inherit both the intensity and the contradictions of their parents. Their eldest, Jose Arcadio, grows into a man of immense physical strength and sensuality, running away with the gypsies and later returning with tattoos covering his body, radiating brute power and carnal desire. His brother, Aureliano, in stark contrast, is introspective and solitary, drawn inward rather than outward. He will eventually become Colonel Aureliano Buendía, the central figure of the civil wars that ravaged the country, embodying both the futility of power and the tragedy of endless conflict. Their daughter, Amaranta, grows into a figure of chastity and bitterness, rejecting suitors and swearing eternal virginity, her life defined as much by what she denies as by what she embraces. Already within the first generation, Marquez sets the stage for one of the book's central patterns: repetition. Names recur: Jose Arcadio, Aureliano, Amaranta, almost like echoes. Personalities mirror one another. Choices seem preordained. The Buendias are caught in cycles of solitude, passion, ambition, and failure, as if destiny is etched into their bloodline. Colonel Aureliano Buendía becomes the most emblematic figure of the novel's theme of futility. He begins as a quiet child who seems destined for obscurity, yet history pulls him into the whirlwind of revolution. Fighting in 32 wars, he survives countless assassination attempts, becomes a legend, and fathers 17 sons with 17 women across the country. Yet despite his stature, the wars lose all meaning for him. What started as a fight for justice and reform devolves into repetition, into war for the sake of war, until he no longer remembers the original cause. He crafts little gold fish in solitude, melting them down and remaking them endlessly, just as his wars circle endlessly without resolution. His trajectory is both heroic and tragic, for he embodies how human effort, no matter how grand, often collapses into insignificance before the weight of time. While the wars consume Aureliano, Ursula continues to preserve the household, raising new generations, balancing chaos with order. Her strength is immense, her influence subtle but unwavering. She sees in her descendants the dangers of repeating the same mistakes. Yet despite her warnings, the Buendias fall again and again into patterns of lust, violence, and solitude. She lives so long that she eventually goes blind, yet even blind she perceives more than others. She represents continuity, the living thread across the century of the Buendias. At the same time, she is painfully aware that her family is caught in a loop that even her endurance cannot break. The family tree grows tangled with new unions and new tragedies. One of the most striking motifs is incest, both literal and symbolic. The Buendias fear the prophecy of children born with a pig's tail, a grotesque marker of their insularity. Yet the temptation to marry cousins, to fold back into the family, recurs throughout the generations. This incest is not merely biological, but also symbolic of the inwardness of solitude. The Buendias are unable to connect outwardly with the world, always turning back into themselves, into the past, into repetition. Over time, Macondo expands. Outsiders arrive, trade increases, and modernity trickles in, yet the town remains strangely detached from the rest of the nation. At one point, an insomnia plague strikes, and everyone forgets not just memories, but the very names of objects, leading them to label everything in order to preserve meaning. Another time, yellow flowers rain from the sky, marking the death of a patriarch. Ghosts become regular visitors, and magical occurrences are treated as everyday facts. Marquez masterfully collapses the boundary between the magical and the real, making the extraordinary feel ordinary. This style, magical realism, is not ornament but essence, for it mirrors how memory, myth, and history intertwine in human consciousness. One of the most dramatic shifts in Macondo comes with the arrival of the banana company. At first, it brings prosperity, jobs, and connections to the outside world. The town modernizes with trains, phonographs, and cinema. But prosperity soon reveals its dark underside. The company exploits workers, manipulates politics, and when the laborers strike for better conditions, the company responds with violence. In one of the most searing episodes, thousands of striking workers are massacred in the town square, their bodies carted away on trains in an attempt to erase the atrocity. Jose Arcadio Segundo, one of the Buendia descendants, survives the massacre and tries to tell others, but the town falls into denial, the memory of the event erased from official history. This massacre, based on real events in Colombian history, symbolizes how collective memory can be silenced, how entire tragedies can vanish from the record, leaving survivors trapped in the solitude of knowing truths others deny. Macondo, once a dream of purity, becomes corrupted by external exploitation and internal decay. The town's decline mirrors the family's decline. Once vibrant, now crumbling, haunted, and collapsing under the weight of time and fate. Love and desire play out with intensity and tragedy across generations. Amaranta's chastity, Remedios the beauty's ethereal purity, Fernanda del Carpio's rigid aristocratic pride, and Petra Coates's sensual vitality all offer variations on how love either flourishes or withers in solitude. Remedios the beauty, so beautiful and innocent that men die for love of her, eventually ascends bodily into the sky, a moment of mystical transcendence that leaves those below both awestruck and bewildered. Her departure is treated not as miracle, but as another strange event in the rhythm of Macondo. In contrast, other love stories are tangled with jealousy, betrayal, and obsession. The Buendias are rarely capable of simple happiness. Their loves are too consuming, too bound to destiny, too charged with repetition. As generations pass, the distinction between Jose Arcadio's and Aureliano's blurs. Jose Arcadio's tend to be strong, impulsive, sensual, and violent, while Aureliano's tend to be solitary, reflective, and doomed to obsession. Yet every new Jose Arcadio and every new Aureliano seems fated to replay the characteristics of the past, unable to break free. The family becomes like a mirror hall, each generation reflecting the last, until time folds in on itself. By the end of the novel, this sense of circular time becomes literal. The last Buendia, Aureliano, Babylonia, discovers Melquiades's parchments, mysterious manuscripts written in Sanskrit and coded language that had sat in the Buendia house for decades. As he deciphers them, he realizes that they contain the entire history of the Buendia family, past, present, and future. Everything that has happened, from the founding of Macondo to its destruction, was already written. He reads that the final Buendia will be born with a pig's tail, fulfilling the original prophecy, and that once this child dies, the family line will vanish. At that very moment, as he finishes reading, the winds rise and Macondo is wiped off the map, erased from existence, as if it had never been. The novel closes with this revelation, that the Buendias were doomed not by chance but by solitude, by their inability to escape repetition, by their inability to truly connect with one another and with the world. Their passions and ambitions were immense, but they circled endlessly back into themselves. Solitude, in Marquez's vision, is both the condition of human existence and the curse of those who cannot break its cycles. The genius of 100 Years of Solitude lies not only in its plot, but in its texture. Marquez writes with such lush detail that Macondo feels both mythical and real. He makes the reader believe in flying carpets and ghosts with the same conviction as political massacres and colonial exploitation. He portrays time not as a straight line, but as a spiral, where events repeat with variation, where memory shapes reality, and where history is doomed to be forgotten and rediscovered endlessly. The novel is also deeply political, though wrapped in allegory. The wars of Colonel Aureliano Buendía reflect the futility of endless civil wars in Latin America. The Banana Company massacre reflects imperial exploitation and the silencing of collective memory. Macondo itself, with its rise and fall, mirrors the history of Latin America, born of utopian dreams, corrupted by outside forces, and consumed by its own contradictions. Yet Marquez does not write a history book. He writes a myth. Macondo is every town and no town. The Buendias are every family and no family. Through them, he captures the universal truth that human lives are shaped by solitude, by memory, by repetition, and by the yearning for connection that so often collapses into isolation. Reading 100 Years of Solitude is like entering a labyrinth where every corridor leads back to where you began, but with slight variations. You recognize patterns, a name repeated, a love triangle echoed, a war remembered and forgotten. Each generation struggles against fate, yet in their struggle they enact the very fate they wish to escape. This sense of inevitability is both tragic and beautiful, for Marquez suggests that human life is both bound and elevated by its patterns. There is grandeur in futility, just as there is poetry in repetition. To summarize the novel is, in some sense, to betray it, because its power lies not only in events, but in the accumulation of detail, in the rhythm of its sentences, in the blending of the ordinary and the miraculous. But even in summary, the arc is clear. The Buendias rise from nothing, build a city, touch greatness, suffer tragedies, and vanish into nothing, erased by wind and time, leaving behind only the echo of their solitude. At its core, the book offers a meditation on memory. Macondo's story is one of remembering and forgetting, of history silenced, of personal grief swallowed, of prophecies unread until it is too late. Marquez suggests that to forget is to die, and yet memory itself can trap us in cycles. The Buendias cannot escape the memory of their ancestors, nor the prophecies of Melquiades, nor the patterns of solitude. Their lives are written before they are lived, but the act of reading, like Aureliano Buendía deciphering the parchments, offers the fleeting illusion of freedom, even as it confirms destiny. The experience of the book lingers because it feels both mythic and intimate. One can recognize in the Buendia's struggles echoes of one's own solitude, one's own repetitions, one's own desires that loop endlessly. At the same time, the scale is vast, encompassing a century, a town, and a continent's history. Marquez once said that he wrote not to tell extraordinary tales, but to tell everyday reality as it is lived in Latin America, where the line between the magical and the real has always been porous. The rain that lasts 4 years, 11 months, and 2 days in Macondo may feel fantastical, but it reflects the floods that devastate real towns. The ghosts that visit are no stranger than the memories that live in every household. Ultimately, 100 Years of Solitude endures because it is not merely the story of the Buendias, but the story of solitude itself. Personal, familial, national, universal. It shows how solitude can be born of pride, of obsession, of love twisted into bitterness, of wars fought too long, of memories erased or ignored. It shows how solitude shapes destinies, how it isolates even amid passion, how it destroys even as it preserves. And yet, within this solitude, there is beauty. The Buendias live lives of intensity, full of miracles and tragedies. Their solitude does not diminish their grandeur, it defines it. When the final pages reveal that everything was preordained, that the parchments contain the story all along, one feels both devastation and awe. It is as if the act of reading itself is mirrored in the novel. For just as Aureliano Buendía reads the fate of his family, we as readers read the fate of Macondo. The story folds back on itself, closing like a circle. And in that closure lies the ultimate truth, that solitude, like history, is inescapable, but within it shines the beauty of human experience. And that's it. 100 Years of Solitude by Gabriel García Márquez. Thanks for listening to Book Nibbles. If you enjoyed this bite-sized book, don't forget to subscribe for more quick, insightful summaries. See you in the next nibble.